process. Okay. Academic writing and critical thinking. Lecture 2 has 4 parts. There are strategies to stimulate critical thinking. Part 2, work on discover a question about which you're passionate. Don't be afraid to ask why. By the way, there's a great article in Paul Edwards' Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Macmillan, 1967, just called Why. He was the editor of the whole series of books, Encyclopedia of Philosophy, but he chose himself to work on the word why. He put a lot of effort into that, classifying different kinds of why questions, some about cause, some about reason, some about what he called super ultimate why, like why is there anything at all? So why is a very interesting question. Part 3, finding a debatable question. And this is really useful. I showed you a paper I wrote recently, 2021, where there was a debatable question, but now I guess you're trying to figure out, how can I find one that's relevant to me? Here are 3 ways. A, from conversation. You're talking to a peer, a colleague, maybe you're walking around the lake, and you start disagreeing about something important. Right? You talk long enough, you're bound to find an area of disagreement. It's just natural. Right? Can't be all smiles all the time. Human interests will come out. So you can find a debatable question in your daily life from friends you have. I know one person in here has a couple of good philosophical friends and walks around a lot talking to them. And that can be a delightful way to find your debatable question. Another way, B, is from differences you see when you read sutta. You might read a sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya, and then you're reading something in the Abhidhamma that looks like it changes that meaning. Or from differences in experts' views. You might be reading some text, Pali Buddha's text or other text, and you find that there's a secondary source by a really smart person who says this paragraph can be interpreted in 2 ways. There is an ambiguity in how we talk about Buddha and the Simsapa leaves. So you know this famous sutta, I'm sure. So the Buddha picks up some leaves and he says, monks, what I know and I have taught you is like this handful of leaves. But what I know and I have not taught you is like all the leaves in the forest. Now, the debatable question comes up, is the Buddha signaling by all the leaves in the forest an infinite amount of knowledge? Or is he referring to a very large but finite amount of knowledge? What does he claim to know but not teach? Does he claim omniscience in that paragraph? I know all, like a Jain would. A Jain, like Mahavira would say, I know all. But even there, it looks like these Tirthankaras, they know what is necessary for salvation in Jainism. They understand moksha and how the jiva can be liberated from impurities and at death go to the top of a world in a bounded universe. They know that. So the question of omniscience can come up if you raise a question about there's an ambiguity in the parable of the Simsapa leaves. it's not clear whether the Buddha is claiming omniscience there or just a great amount of knowledge. Now let's think of comparatively in comparative religions for just a moment. The Pope of Roman Catholicism is thought by Roman Catholics to be infallible, but only under certain conditions. He has to be speaking about faith and morals. He's not infallible and he's not omniscient about all kinds of scientific facts, only about faith and morals, and only, his followers say, when he sits on the chair of St. Peter, that is ex cathedra, from the chair. Typically that would be when he makes a papal encyclical. An encyclical is a very large and technical document. So we could do an interesting study about what the Buddha knows and under what condition he knows it with what other religious leaders, like leaders of Jainism or leaders of Roman Catholicism, how do they regard omniscience? And fourth thing here in this lecture too is including a Buddhist perspective in critical thinking and academic writing. I had been doing these lectures for a couple of years, and I was struggling with this fourth point. And then Dr. Hamsa gave a lecture of his own, which I think I referenced here at the end. Let me see if it's there, in which he tackled this question. Yeah. Let's see if it's referred to here. No, not in this, not in this. So I'll come to it in another slide. Okay. All right. Anybody ever heard of Joseph Campbell? Yeah. What is he most famous for?
How can I say this? Language barrier stuff. So he's famous for the work, his works on mythologies, the hero's journey, the recapture of archetypes, the
borrowing from Carl Jung.
Yeah, from Jung, stuff.
Okay, so he wrote many popular books, right, about mythology, and when we see them on video, the hero with 1,000 faces, from one culture, the hero elides into, because of the magic of the camera, one hero elides into another hero and may have a different name, a different country from, and so on. But the hero with 1,000 faces is basically you, insofar as you have the potential to become a Buddha or to become enlightened in some way. So he showed people that whatever culture they were in, they had the potential for greatness. We learn about it through myth and symbol. I went to a lecture by Dr. Kevin Collieri one night at Siam Society, and I thought, this is pretty interesting. He was an educator from Washington, D.C., and he identifies 21st century skills: critical thinking, creative thinking, collaboration, and communication. So that means things like from you to me, communication, from you to each other, collaboration, talking. Not just critical thinking, but also creative thinking. So analysis chops up things into parts, but synthesis puts things together. So only if you have that creative idea will you be able to both analyze a topic and put it together in a meaningful way. Here's my philosophical cat who screams out, "Why? Why is there air? Why is there something and not nothing?"
Let's say I'm from Myanmar. So the way we study is we have to go by on floor, even our master, right? We did
Right.
See there.
Right. Go back. And that's your experience too, I guess, Venables, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if you put the question down, why is that this is like same? You're trying to challenge with your master. That's a very big problem. So when I'm sorry to say that. So now I got to know I'm not sure about the Western country.
Yes.
Some they try to show purpose in front of students. So they don't want to show weakness. So I'm proper teacher. So if you ask some question, it's that question they cannot answer you. It's very shameful. That's why I ask John why is that and why? So it's been like you're trying to make it to be ashamed if you cannot answer your question.
Yeah.
So some is been like you're trying to find his weakness.
Yeah, I see.
That's what I know from our culture. So yeah, it's their problem. When you talk about students should be why, but their problem.
Okay, let me relate to that because I'm on both sides. That is, I've lived for years in Asia, and I've also lived for years in America and in England. What I see is the possibility that by staying with the difficult questions, by living in the mystery of the question, you can learn to be a debater who doesn't debate in order to destroy people, who debates in order to open up new questions. When I was a very young man, about 21, and just graduated from a philosophy program, and surprising to me, because I thought maybe I'll follow my father in his line of business, surprising to me, two professors from the department came up and said, different, unconnected to each other, "Why didn't you ask me to write you a letter of reference?" And I said, "What? Letter for what? Letter of reference for what?" "Well, graduate school, dummy." I was astonished. I'm sure on one of those occasions, my mouth fell open. I had no thoughts of graduate school. And they said, "Well, look at what's happening in the seminars. You have good questions. You can cooperate with people well, but you have good questions. We want you to go and represent the department somewhere." I was just astonished. What? So that could happen to anyone who keeps trying to do two things: be critical and be kind together. You don't be critical to destroy someone. You be critical to open up new possibilities for understanding. And then you become valuable. So I hope you can all do that to some extent in your own life. Does it make sense? So it's not hard, not too hard to do. You just need practice. And in this class, I give you 2 practice time, week 7 and week 14, to present on paper something you thought about in the form of a debatable question, and you're taking a point of view about it and in the ways I've identified. Here's another interesting slide. In ancient India, the parable of the blind men and the elephant shows the perspectival nature of all belief. So you have these blind people and they're around trying to define the elephant. So they look for the properties they can verify. And one says, oh, it's a tree. Another, feeling the trunk, says, oh, it's a snake. Feeling the ear, it's a fan. Or it's a wall. It's a rope. It's a spear. They're all giving partial perspectives. And that shows that belief is often a matter of perception of an aspect of something. Fact claims and definitions. Surely the example of the blind men and the elephant reveal differences of perspective, but is there another way to use the example? You can ask the questions, what does it mean and how do you know? First, what does it mean to ask, is it an elephant? Is this question a request for a biological fact, or is it a request for a definition? A fact claim would be, it is an elephant based on biological data. It's not a human. It's not a giraffe. Okay. A conceptual claim would be, it is an elephant based on the concept of elephant. Concept and fact are different orders of knowledge. Why is this important? Because you are making a thesis claim, and the kind of evidence that supports a conceptual claim is evidence from concepts and definitions in a dictionary. And the kind of evidence that supports a fact claim is evidence from other facts. We have to have premises, steps with the appropriate kinds of supporting evidence. Okay, evidence and argument strategies. So this is in your email. If you want to study it more, you can study it more. Ask questions to discover your own real question. This is a strategy, an evidence and argument strategy. So you might first start by asking, where can you get evidence concerning what you want to argue? Well, conversation in daily life about debatable questions. You meet a Theravada and he says, oh, Nirvana is such a blessed state. I hope I get there in this life. And it's so difficult, but it's a blessed state. And samsara is so miserable. I hope I don't go round and round. And these are very different. And then you meet somebody from Tibet and they say, well, wait a minute. My teacher Nagarjuna showed me how to think that nirvana is a way of seeing things differently, not seeing other things in some metaphysical way. So then you have apparently a difference. One school of Buddhism apparently wants to identify nirvana with samsara, and the other wants to say, oh, these are very different. What could be more different? So there's a way of bringing them together, but you have to think. It's not obvious on the surface. On the surface, boom, 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 right? Pain, suffering. So you might go at it like this. What evidence supports the view opposite to yours? When you impartially assess the evidence, which view has the better evidence supporting it? Yours or the opposite? And there you have to be open-minded. You have to say, I don't know everything. I'm looking to learn. So I listen to somebody else, just like people coming to the side of the Buddha, sitting by the side of the Buddha, saying, I just come to check it out. I don't know. Let's see what the Buddha has. If on first look, the evidence is more impressive for a different view than yours, you may decide to modify your view or change it, even when you're writing a paper. Or you may decide to find more evidence for your view. So here I have to make a comment. when you are writing a paper, let's say you've already developed your template, subject, topic, paper title, thesis, you know what you want to argue for. But in the course of arguing it, you find evidence against your thesis more reasonable than the evidence for your thesis. Now, that could be for different reasons. One might be you haven't looked hard enough, and you should look harder for that evidence for your thesis. Another way of thinking about it is it just could be that somebody else has a better view and it's not yours. So flexibly thinking about it, you will decide whether you want to throw it away and start again, subject, topic, paper title with negation of your thesis, start another one, or not. My instinct tells me that, as I say, the smart money is on holding on to your thesis as long as you can and not suddenly shifting to something else, because it's a lot of work to develop a main argument. Shift only when you see it's the only good move, the only honest move to make. So if the archaeologist has discovered something that contradicts his thesis, the honest thing is not to bury the evidence, but to move on and change the thesis, right? Okay. This is a short way to see the big picture of what I'm trying to do today. I want to engage you in debatable questions this semester. I'd like you to think of possible answers to the debatable questions that we confront together. I'm not going to give the answer. Very often in philosophical thinking, there isn't one answer. Very often there are multiple answers which can be defended to a greater or lesser degree by reasonable premises. So we start with a debatable question, we consider possible answers, and then we develop a template, subject, topic, paper, title, thesis, and then we develop a main argument for that approach. The main argument has premises, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or however many you need, therefore, thesis. So the thesis in the therefore blank of the main argument is the same as the thesis in the template, subject, topic, paper, title, thesis. Once you get the template done, it's almost a piece of cake, almost easy to get the main argument. First, you copy and paste the thesis into the therefore blank. Next, you think upwards from the thesis, chopping it into parts, positioning them after numbers, and making them into well-formed sentences. Actually, the most important questions in philosophy are why, what does it mean, how do you know, and what's the evidence? These are questions in semantics, epistemology, and evidential search. Meaning, knowledge, and pragmatics. After we think about it and know that the thesis statement is on a debatable question and is meaningful, neither self-contradictory nor nonsense. There are a couple of kinds of meaninglessness. If I say, that's a meaningless series of sounds. That's one kind of meaninglessness. But if I say, Tuesday is red, well, we know Tuesday is a day of the week, and days of the week cannot be red or not red. I put to the side the idea that in Thailand, days are associated with colors. I don't mean that. So Tuesday is not the kind of entity that can either have or lack a color. So as long as you're on a debatable question which is meaningful, that means neither self-contradictory nor nonsense, then you can find appropriate evidence. And again, fact claims can be proven with other facts. Conceptual claims can be proven by showing their fit or coherence with other conceptual statements. And when you're writing a paper in the course, it's very good if you can stay on one level or the other and not keep jumping back and forth and muddling it up. If you have a topic like on the concept of nirvana, you want to stay on the conceptual level and use the relevant tools, maybe Polytech Society Dictionary, maybe nowadays some other internet sources, maybe Google Scholar. You want to stay on the conceptual level, and then you get an answer that relates to what you started with. But if you start filling up your paper with what I call junk, just padding, oh, there's this story and there's that story, and then I read this, and conceptual statements are proven by their fit or coherence with other conceptual statements. Fact claims are proven with other fact statements. Okay, so here's really what the whole PPT is driving at. Some advice and also questions to stimulate your critical thinking. Start with the subject that interests you and choose a topic that is smaller than the subject. The paper title, which is smaller than the topic, subject, topic, paper title. And example might be the concept of peaceful means. Then within the topics, do you notice some that are really worth debating? Within these, do you figure out one that really interests you? So if so, follow your bliss rather than pick the one that most people have a consensus about. When I taught undergraduates in the States, a lot of them were taught by someone who said, what's important is that we all agree. So when we have a discussion, let's try to find a consensus. No philosopher ever told me that in a philosophy class. None. They said, try to pick apart the arguments and think which is the best one. But in discussions, especially with Pacific Island students when I was teaching at the University of Hawaii, you'd get in a small group and you'd have a question we're working on. And at first it would look promising because one person advocated something and another person said, no, it's like that. And then you get to the fifth person and he or she says, well, I agree with what everybody else just said. And if you let it go and you don't question him, then the sixth person says the same thing until you finally have to say, well, look, you're the seventh person and you agree with what everybody else already said. How is that possible? Because the first and the second person contradicted each other. Oh, yeah, I guess you're right. So I agree with that too. So it's painful sometimes when people face the contradictions and then they have to say, yeah. And we find this in Sutta Pitaka too. And the Buddha had a handy rule for debate on that. He said, if you contradict yourself 3 times and don't see the contradiction, we are not going to talk to you anymore. You're not in the debate. Instead, what's going to happen to you, sir, is a thunderbolt bearing yakka will come from the heavens and split your skull into 7 pieces. And then you'll really be gone from the debate. Now, that's a mythopoeic way of saying you have to be a communicator to play the game of debate. You can't make nonsense things that contradict each other and think that you're a useful person. Well, another thing you can do to stimulate your critical thinking is to think who would take the opposite point of view. And for that, you need a tool, not just google.com, but googlescholar.com. If you've been in China, you might never have had the benefit of that, but many people find googlescholar.com very useful. I typically use it myself when I'm building a paper. And how I use it is when I have a thesis that I think is pretty good, I copy and paste it into Google Scholar and find out who agrees with that. And if there are a bunch of people who agree with that, I make a place called Data Junkyard at the bottom of my draft, and I copy the URLs from all these people. And then I do the opposite. I put in my thesis into Google Scholar, and then I put not, making the negation of my thesis. And the same thing, press enter. You generate a list of people who disagree with you, maybe in a book, maybe in an article. And the same thing, I save the data for further study. So having a target of somebody who believes different from you in the first paragraph of your paper is smart. It shows your thesis is important enough to disagree with. If everybody would agree with it, then why are you even saying it? I mean, it's not new knowledge, right? A thesis in this course is supposed to be a new contribution, a contribution to knowledge, not just repeating something somebody already knows. Okay, now here's another strategy you can use. Do you have more than one possible thesis? If so, you can label them T1, T2, T3, and in that, start deliberating to decide which one is the best for you to argue within the space provided. You might have 5-page paper, you might have 10, you might have 20-page paper. And depending on, as I like to put it, the canvas, how big is the canvas? Are you making a Persian miniature or are you making a wall painting? Depending on how much room you have to develop your premises, you will take one strategy or another. And here's an actual student deliberating in order to decide on a thesis. I show examples from students who are in different stages of creating a template and main argument. Here she has template A. In a course on Buddhist psychotherapy and counseling, she writes subject, Buddhist psychotherapy and counseling. Topic, the concept of friendship and peace. Sounds good so far. Paper title, concept of peaceful means. Thesis, I'm totally stuck. So let me list the things that could be my thesis. T1, the concept of peaceful means is the 4 Brahma Viharas. T2, the concept of peaceful means is the 4 factors, metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha. T3, the concept of peaceful means includes the 4 factors. T4, the concept of peaceful means includes the 4 factors, and the concept of inner peace is necessary to develop peace. T5, the concept of peaceful means is more fundamental than the analysis of peaceful means in terms of inner and outer peace. Okay, now I'd like you to think ahead. Whatever thesis you choose, it has to have enough content for you to generate premises that will lead to it. Because you'll get to the position where you have blank premise lines and you know what your thesis is. So you start copying and pasting phrases from your thesis up above. And then you make a sentence about each one. And then you make them all fit together. What is a template? I call it a data funnel. It funnels the data you get from your research from large to small. So subject, the biggest one. If you were an undergraduate, you're not, but if you were, the subject might be the title of a book, like Asian Philosophy by John Kohler. Subject, Asian philosophy. Topic might be the title of a chapter, like Theravada Buddhism. Paper title might be a bold type heading from that chapter, like The Way to Nirvana. And the thesis would be your own making, your own sentence. Okay, I'll show you some more examples from students. Here they are. So here's a student who has finished the template and main argument. And you can see what I've just said demonstrated here. His thesis is health for mind and body is not concerned with past or future, but only with the present. And his main argument resulted from putting the terms one by one. Health comes here, premise one. Are you following? Do you see what I'm doing? Okay. In premise two, led by mind. And then a premise about past and a premise about present. And this can follow from these premises. So going back, what the students are doing here is a technical way illustrating these big concepts. These are big concepts. And on a sheet of paper, I call it a worksheet, we generate the data like this. Subject, topic, paper title, thesis is a template. We work from big to little. So the smallest thing is going to be a sentence with a verb. A verb is an action or existence word. But all of these other things are just words or phrases. Subject is usually a word. Topic is several words. Paper title, usually connected by and, 3 words, or on the concept of. As you do more work with this, it becomes second nature. Where mindfulness matters is in mindful discovery. There is a process to getting there. Be aware mindfully in the present moment with bare attention for a while. After clearing your mind of distractions and defilements as best you can, find your question of genuine inquiry. That is a debatable one. A question important to you, so worth your time. It will not be settled just by quoting a sutta. It's important to you, so it's worth your time. Actually, the subconscious mind is a great source of debatable questions. I sometimes get up in the middle of the night and write down something that I found. It had been there, but not in my conscious mind. And I write it down. And then the next day I go back to it and try to generate the negation of it, think about who would think otherwise, think about why I thought of it when I was supposed to be sleeping. It must be something important because I couldn't repress it. It popped up from my unconscious mind. And a lot of these things are good for life. In other words, you learn something about your life values by exploring what will pop up when you're trying to go to sleep or when you're meditating and you're trying to think nothing. It comes up anyway. At first, you might think, how annoying. I'm trying to meditate and this baffling question comes up. How annoying. And how stupid I am. I can't meditate. I have to think something instead of... Okay. So I'm trying to follow, let's say, Buddhadasa's 5 easy tricks. Okay. And I get stuck. I'm stuck with something that is not the goal. But somehow I can't get past that. Well, there might be still something you could learn right there. Why is it that you're stuck on that? Ask yourself, investigate your own mind. You might find an interesting truth. Here's another template. And there, the student has gone beyond just deliberating in order to decide, has come to the view that this is the best thesis she can find. And by the way, in my life, even on published papers, I always think this is the best I could do at the time. No apologies. Life is a process. Things are not perfect. But if it's the best you could do at the time, great. Maybe in another paper you can return to that and write a sequel, which is even more carefully articulated. Just don't give up on yourself. That's the key thing. If you're tempted to give up on yourself, contact me and I will sit with you and talk about your puzzle. Okay? Writing a philosophical thesis with Buddhist form was something Dr. Hongso recommended to a group of us. And now I'm going to extrapolate on it by using the Four Noble Truths in everyday language. I put it like this: there is suffering, it starts, it stops, and there's a path to make it stop. Using Buddha's method, any philosophy can be analyzed into problem, cause, solution, way to the solution. And 2 books by someone I very much respect as a teacher, Arthur Herman from University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, wrote 2 books for undergraduates using this method, the Four Noble Truths model. They are called The Ways of Philosophy, and more recently, Community, Violence, and Peace in the 21st Century. Gandhi, King, Leopold, and the Buddha. So in Herman's way of thinking, the Buddha is a philosopher. He's a philosopher of the first rank, alongside the environmentalist Aldo Leopold, the civil rights worker Martin Luther King, who is himself a minister and fought a lot. Aldo and Gandhi. Gandhi developed the concept of ashram, a spiritual place, and he developed several of them in South Africa and India, trying to fine-tune them and make them better. So these people cared, and they show us that philosophy matters, and that the kinds of communities you can create using a philosophical approach can change the world. Anyway, here's a summary. 4 components of the academic paper. Paper title, introduction, body of the paper with premises supported by reasons and examples. This is the key thing. This isn't busy work. When you got your argument, you just position it under something that says the body of the paper. You put your premises right there and your conclusion right there. And then you develop reasons and examples for each premise going down the line. It's something people do. It's a process. And finally, the conclusion. The thesis, if it is well crafted, will follow logically from the premises. Okay, showed you this already. And to earn the certificate, other students had to do this, but not you. So, making an academic paper has a purpose. You are trying to convince somebody that something is arguably true. To do that, you make a template, making a thesis that states only in one sentence what is to be deductively proven. It should be positioned in the first paragraph, that thesis. And then the body of the paper explains the premises, and in the conclusion it follows. Now, these are some things I've looked at in thinking about how to do the challenging work of introducing students at IBSC to a greater way than just repeating or reciting or doing somebody else's job all over for them. Okay, I hope it brings value to your life, and I guess we've got time for a break now. Okay.
Council only settle the Dhamma and Vinaya. There is no the evidence show the Abhidhamma during the first Buddhist Council. There is no Abhidhamma, only the Dhamma and Vinaya, because at that time Abhidhamma is here. At the time Abhidhamma here, in terms of Dhamma, Abhidhamma is there. So during the first Buddhist Council, only the Dhamma and Vinaya used, no Abhidhamma. No Abhidhamma. Okay, I go fast. And I put the question, why the Vinaya recited first? Why the Vinaya recited first? You see? The answer is here. This is the question. The question, this is the answer. The answer in Pali. This is the answer in Pali. This is the answer in English. This is translation, sorry. This is translation from the question, why the Vinaya recite first? Why the Vinaya recited first? See the Pali first. Avuso. This is Venerable Mahakassapa question in Pali. Avuso. Patamam king sankhama Thamma va Vinaya Thammam va Vinayam vatis. Among Dhamma and Vinaya, which one recite first? Which one recite first? Which one which one rehearse first? Or which one recite first? And then Bhikkhu Ahamsu. Ante. Mahakassapa Videyo Nama Sasanasa Ayu Mahakassapasa Videyo Nama Sasanasa Ayu Vinaye Tite Sasanang Hoti Tasma Pathamang Vinayang Sankhamati. You see, the answer is this one. Okay, before going to the answer, the Dhamma and Vinaya is older than the Dhamma is, this explanation, the Dhamma is older than Vinaya. Among the Dhamma and Vinaya, the Dhamma is older than Vinaya, right? The Dhamma took place first. Dhamma took place first, so the Dhamma is older than the Vinaya. Vinaya, the Buddha enacted with the Vinaya rule after 20 years. The Buddha laid out the rule after 20 years of the Buddha enlightenment. So the Dhamma older than Vinaya. But see the second paragraph, the third paragraph, you see, however, in the first Buddhist council, Mahakassapa asked Mahasangha which part we should do the council first. Among the Dhamma and Vinaya, which part should do the council first? Then many man answer. Vinaya, see the underline, everyone, see the underlines. Vinaya is the lines of sasana. Vinaya is the lines of sasana. If Vinaya exists, you see, if Vinaya exists, Dhamma exists. Vinaya exists, Dhamma exists. Therefore, we should rehearse the Vinaya first. Or is it better if rehearse the Vinaya first? And this passage very important. This passage very important. Among the Dhamma and Vinaya, yes, of course, the Dhamma older than Vinaya, but
they didn't give up. One of the constables put a line and said, "You cannot go through." The police line, "You may not go through." And they kept going, and the constables called them back. And then they went to the back of the line with this regiment. The line extremely long because many people supported. What were they trying to prove? They were trying to prove that nonviolent resistance against unjust laws, in this case, is the salt tax. Everybody needs salt for the British to have the same tax on rich and poor for the salt. And then people who are suffering, they have to pay a tax on their own salt. They demonstrate they can go to the ocean and get salt for free. So why should they pay tax to the British government? So it's an illustration of satyagraha. When the king used a similar technique, he called it Christian satyagraha. At the Thesis in Alabama, the people were faced with horses, with pistols, with clubs, and with gas. Make you see fall down. And even someone with disease. Arguably, they pulled out against the civilian population who had the authorization to walk to my country. And so Martin Luther King said, we're keeping on going. Don't curse them, don't spit, don't reply, don't resist, just keep going. I agree with that to myself. That's what happened. That's so easy. Using the methods of change the system. I don't think you know technical. That's the most.
There's no special philosophy for candidate. They just use its heart.
Yeah. I understand too, because without heart, nothing is moved. As he said, don't think of this as some way to force people to think like you. You have to elicit their feeling that it's a good thing to support the cause. Now they have to, and we can't use laws to force them. We have to elicit their goodness by our willingness to suffer. So it turns suffering, which is a basic fact of life, into a tool for human self-improvement. People would produce psychologists, and eventually the constables think, why I not down and make killing unarmed people who don't do anything. So the part of the offender is softened by the kindness of the people. It's worth reading, even if the learning is not convinced. I have lectured on this book many years, sometimes in novels, sometimes in China, and students read the courses. One student came to me after the lecture, and all they were how much for the world in their places. I'm going to sit in the class and read. I have the right to do this, believing what I believe. So you can't say you don't have a right to believe what you believe, but you can present evidence that suggests perhaps this isn't a reasonable belief. Whether you change somebody depends on many factors. Their willingness to see more than one side of the question is one good factor. And that goes to their education. It's really about what's called education. When I was in the college preps, high school, I had to memorize some documents. In grade school, I had memorized just like the ones the catechism with questions about who made you, God, why did God make you, God made you to walk no other service. On and on, you cannot get out of grade school without that. Just like you cannot really talk about knowing much. You'll be able to do so. But in my view, it's more important to be able to analyze than to use. That's why the thing. These community creators, vehicle really creators can really benefit and use by offering some choices about things that matter. Much of philosophy is so precise and so carefully worded that most ordinary people doesn't really matter the reaction, power reactions. The very common reaction, Jeff, and a teacher and a prosecutors. They all hate it. I can't go there with you. So what do? You have to teach philosophy at elementary. You teach philosophy that matters. And then people will just, maybe they don't read, at least they have this. That's one way to teach undergraduate course. Now it's a different world now. It's with really serious questions about these three countries, United States, Russia, a lot of complex. Your generation, I've already spent much as a person with the kids, civil rights, and that kind of family. It's gone. How are we going to keep from struggling? Ecology, anybody else would like to come and sit or you know how to proceed? Thank you for your attention. I realized that when you do this teachers, you can we try to convert people, but to see the world where a lot comes. I don't think that by and large, very well. I had a pursuit that teaching class. In other words, I think one of my teachers, Stephen Morris, if you get people a little bit that will work harder to argue their position, maybe you find that argue is good enough, so more. The goal is not to make people feel better, but to stimulate their curiosity. I'll tell you how my first teacher of analytic metaphysics theory. It's a method I couldn't emulate. I only took his method of analysis, which was also important by Oscar's introduction to this. How we would do it is like this. I went to the philosophy department office at the University of Missouri. So I saw the philosophy really stuff. And this guy would go into his office an hour before the class. And he would just think. He would write into that business. He was working with an argument in his head. And then he came into the classroom. All bottles, blazing, hair everywhere. This was a sentence. And using the chalk as if it was a cigarette. He would stride up to the platform and write down notes out of his mind. And he'd say, well, what do you think? True or false? And then we'd argue. And after a little while, most students would agree, arguably true. So it was between 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, until he made the inference. So therefore, oh no, he did it again. Moral importance was totally ridiculous. I can't believe that. But you believe all these other things you told me. And there's an inference chain that leads to this. Therefore, so if you believe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you must get 7. Just to prove it. Because it's logically entailed by the argument. Okay, go home and think about what's wrong. We would get some of the life we would spend time with. It became passionate, it became real for us. We go home and try to figure it out and come back with this. That's philosophy that matters in the middle of this stuff. Because it exercises, it gets you going. You need to see what it is. The cat is anyway, that's a digression. That's how I got interested in the adversarial method of philosophy by a great teacher who didn't get tenure anywhere and became a pro bono lawyer. He was so smart. But he didn't fit into academia. One of those great moments in life to have a teacher like that. Okay, let's see what's next. Oh, next is to use the book. Okay, bing. I want to introduce you to some key points in the book. I ask you to read only the introduction from. And I hope I can make it real for you so that you see the importance of this author, whose name is Justin McDaniel. You can search on Google and Google Scholar, and you probably won't find a more well-established, cleverer Buddhist theoretician than him. But he's not only a philosopher, he's a historian of ideas too. Okay, what does he do in the introduction to Gathering Leaves and Lifting Words? First, he tells you how he got to do this work. A few years ago at a monastery in Laos, I spent some time looking for a key on the banks of the Mekong River. And it was the largest monastic school in Laos. The first thing I feel in reading these couple of pages is the authenticity of the man. He's not an armchair philosopher about Buddhism. He went to several countries and studied with the famous monks, first studying Pali, Laos, and 2 other languages. So he had a good command of the relevant languages. Anyway, he talks about finding this key because he thinks there are going to be some good texts in there that the old monk who passed away was using to teach his students. He wanted to find the good texts. And try as he might, he never found those good texts. But it was an interesting adventure looking for the key because he met several abbots and several smart students who was helping him. What is curriculum? Is one of the first questions he raises on page 6. What is curriculum? Now, you know how we use the word here in IBSC, right? You've seen syllabi before. A course of study is the curriculum. And the curriculum sets different things we should learn very clearly. For example, if you read a syllabus by my esteemed colleague, Venerable Sampong, you might read something that said, this is critical studies of the Tripitaka. In this course, when you quit, you should be able to criticize every point in the Abhidhamma. You should be able to criticize every point in the Vinaya. You should be able to criticize every point in the Sutta Pitaka. Wow, it's pretty overwhelming, isn't it? But that is a high idea, a high ideal. Even if we could only do a little of that, it would be great. On my syllabus, when I teach, sometimes with him, critical studies of the Tripitaka, I have a few sentences to explain what I mean by critical. I do not mean denying the teachings of the Buddha. I do not mean disrespecting the teachings of the Buddha. I mean analyzing what is said, distinguishing different possible meanings, and trying to find the clearest Dhamma I can find. So it's a positive goal, but it starts with separating out, like vitarka. Starts with separating out. And then after you've analyzed, you put it together. You synthesize. You need both analysis and synthesis. You need to be able to say, okay, this is a meaning, and this is another meaning, and how do we put them together? If we can't put it together, it's not meaningful. But here is what McDaniel thinks about curriculum. It's different from what we think here. I have to read a little bit. What I found by studying with the monks in Laos was that my idea of language and languaging changed. Curricula put texts into different contexts. That's what curricula do. They bring together texts and oral performances of texts in dynamic context of teaching and learning, a developed process of negotiation between teachers and students, canon and commentaries, classical and vernacular, oral and written, physical and intellectual, aesthetic and ethical, secular and religious. So a lot of the terminology that we learn in courses in religious studies curriculum, he problematizes, like the distinction between secular and religious. What is lifting words teaching? It's in the title, right? Lifting words. He spends time explaining that on page 7. It is only by understanding the method that teachers practice in different monasteries on their own, based on their own experience, where they lift a phrase from Pali and they talk about it in different ways from their own experience, not from a dictionary, not from Monier Sanskrit dictionary or Polytech Society dictionary. They don't talk like a bibliophile. They talk like a person who has experienced life and taught many students. So he might tell a story suddenly about the phrase. How about the phrase, seeing things as they really are? My old teacher, Kurupahana, could lift that phrase and talk about it for a half an hour because he was an experienced Dhamma man. Sometimes opinionated. I didn't always agree with him, but very interesting man, very interesting scholar. Seeing things as they really are is seeing beyond phenomena of things. In one way, it's to see with the abhinya, with the divine eye, divine ear, and ultimately from the point of view of the knowledge of the destruction of the asanas. But few people could really do that unless they had spent years in meditation. So this one little bitty thing, seeing things as they really are, yatha bhutam, is a special kind of seeing that we don't get by a dictionary. Some of you already have it in this room. I'd be guessing, but I'd be guessing on probability that some of you are already tisovidya. And some of you may be on the way to understanding knowledge of the destruction of the asanas. And if you're not, maybe your teacher was. So we are a tradition together we make a difference to society. I can't be a monk like many of you. It's just not my rule, at least not now. And you can't be a layperson. You made the choice to take the role. But we can work together. And I think working together, we make a better difference than if we think, oh, that person's a monk. I got to be careful. I can't approach that person. Or the monk might think, oh, a layman, I got to be very careful. I can't show myself to be ignorant on anything. I have to uphold the tradition. So if we kind of talk to each other enough to break down these barriers out of the class, we'll get great value. So I want to encourage you to talk to all the people in the class, regardless of your country, regardless of your background, because that's the cultural learning that IBSC can make happen for you here in the years of your stay. You know, I spent a year in an institute at the East-West Center in Hawaii called the Cultural Learning Institute. But let me tell you, this is the real cultural learning place right here. You are at the site of cultural exchange. And there are going to be conflicts, and that's part of the process of learning when there are conflicts. So it's like dukkha and sukha. You know, I wouldn't say a life without suffering is a human life. So I wouldn't expect that learning without conflict is a life that's going to help you much. If everything is soft and mushy and we're all around the campfire, that's not good enough. There has to be some disagreement. And the adversarial method of philosophical argumentation will help you develop your acumen. Some people already have it. And that's a great benefit when they speak up. So lifting words is a method of teaching very different from what Western scholars do. If you're from an Asian tradition, you should feel proud of your tradition because chances are you learned Dhamma by that method. What about secular and religious? Justin McDaniel on page 11 talks about that distinction. And his idea is that I look at one phrase. It is debatable whether specific subject areas like astronomy, protective magic, monastic discipline, Pali grammar, and mythological stories are easily called either religious or secular. As somebody was asking me before, what's the boundary line between this and that? He's asking, in the lived experience of Buddhism in Asian culture, how can I make that distinction? Give you another example from Chinese astronomy and astrology. If you talk to Westerners, they tell you they believe in astronomy, but they don't believe in astrology. But if you talk to Nathan Sivan, who's just recently passed, so you cannot talk, he would have explained to you that astronomy and astrology in ancient China were part of a package. You didn't pick one. It was part of a worldview. So who made these distinctions? Textbook authors and doctrinaire teachers. There was one called Mircea Eliade, and at the University of Chicago, he crafted the vocabulary that most religious studies courses, curriculum in the Western sense, are still being taught in. He said there is a distinction between the sacred and the profane, and he taught the book about that. So many people read it. And he also said our subject can be divided up into scripture, pilgrimage, and text. No, that's scripture. scripture, pilgrimage, and prayer. He made these three categories. It's almost like it's a cookie cutter, and I can apply it to Islam, to Christianity, to Buddhism, to Hinduism, to teach general courses. Wherever you go, you're going to find these, he said. And he signaled there are certain rites of passage, like birth, marriage, and death in any culture. If you're expecting to see them, you will find them. If you come with a cookie cutter, you will find examples. So that kind of curriculum is not what you're taught if you're taught in an Asian monastery, right, by a master. I'm curious, I don't know if it's too much, but if I could ask Tenzin Dorji, could you describe a little bit how texts are taught in Tibetan monasteries by real masters? How does it work?
It's taught by
teaching. Yeah, how does teaching work?
Two class. So one is that a lecture is teacher will teach text, then all things.
Okay, lecture classes.
Lecture class.
Oh, that's better.
Okay, lecture class. So even during lecture class time, we can debate with teacher with respectfully. Okay, teacher may say something and he will explain you, but you can ask him and also you can debate with him.
Oh, you can debate with the teacher? Interesting, like the West.
Yeah, so you can debate with him
Yeah.
in the classroom. This is like a formal classroom, right?
Yeah.
So teacher sit on that like a seat and we have to sit floor. So he will teach you, but during teaching time also you can debate with him what he is teaching, his idea. It's something like you mentioned your thesis, right? So he will teach you the Buddha teaching and also sutras and also the commentary, everything. That's a formal class. So another formal class, we say debate yard, where monks are debating. The individual class, like this is a classroom, right? So students, they're discussing. So we have to gather in the debate yard. So you have a class. So you have a different teachers. Even one class, okay, let's say, for example, my class, we have 300 monks. So different teachers, you can join any teacher you want. So then when you reach in the classroom where the debate yard, it's like just the ground, we gather there. So then you have like a section A, B, C, right? So we have to discuss in the group, we have to discuss, and individual also we are debating. So when debate, there's answerer and debater. So debater will put question and answerer will have to answer. And we have to discuss on your understanding or what your teacher taught you, and also what you understand from the Buddha's teaching, and also what you understand from the scripture. This is how the process of teaching.
Is that similar or different to what you would find in Myanmar or another country? What was just described, is that similar or different to your experiences?
So I think this is we came from the Nalanda tradition, we believe. Because during Buddha time, also Buddha, the outsider like Jain or the Brahmanism, they come to Buddha and they debate, right? This structure came to Nalanda tradition. From Nalanda tradition, it's like more stronger, and then it's come to Tibet.
And the Dalai Lama himself follows Mahaprasangika tradition. Please.
So it's also same thing in our monastery. Also, we follow like that. Like when debating time, during the class time, we have like a class for 40 minutes. Then 20 minutes we debate to ask the question to the teacher directly, to the master. Or sometimes master didn't talk anything. He just sit down in the class and he gives some question to let us to think about it. And we think like 20 minutes or 20 minutes, then master just observe every student.
And what country is it?
In India, my class.
Okay.
My master is most of time like he have the different kind of classes he took. But for like senior, we have like 7 to 8 grade students. So senior student, he just gives some question before he come to the class, or he just send the question paper to the student, the monitor to take the question paper in a class and think before the teacher come.
Oh,
So we just think and make some like our own ideas, and he write it down to some important key point on the board. Then he ask every student come and talk something about that topics. And if sometimes we don't understand, then we debate with the master and ask question why this sutta talking about like that. But according like Buddha times like that. But now it's applied. How it is possible to can practice this teaching to Buddha teaching right now? Not. Then master replied in different creative way, and he took the student ideas and he make the conclusion about it.
okay. Yeah, thanks. Does anybody want to represent another point of view? Anybody behind me want to represent another point of view? Venerable John or anybody up there? About your way of understanding Buddhism from a teacher?
For Theravada country, mostly we try to understand Buddhism from Tipitaka like that. So we the teacher did not play much role in Theravada tradition actually. Like if I don't agree with my master or my preceptor, so if his teaching is opposite to the Tipitaka, I also maybe can walk away from his temple like that. So it's just a little bit different from Mahayana Tibetan. That's all, not much.
Okay. Thank you for your comment. Let's see, what else can I introduce you to from the introduction of Justin McDaniel's very interesting book? He makes this point on page 13 about how a venerable teaching students through Jataka pictures, through song and dance about Buddhist themes, and his good life behavior. There's a whole section on this from 12 to 13. One thing that struck me is, I remember from reading the Pali text that monks are not supposed to go near dance halls or theaters or any kind of entertainment. Well, it seems that in some monasteries, there are Buddhist entertainments available, not the sexy entertainment of the common people, right? But Buddhist entertainment to make some points memorable. Do you find that in your experience, that these are there in your tradition? No? Theravada, right? Don't find it, right? Anybody in Mahayana will find that, how to use art like Jataka. If you go to our own temple up there, and someday when the side door panel is open, you go under there, you can see nice murals being used for instruction. These paintings, some of them are about niraya. You know, if you don't do well, akusala karma, the outcome will be like this. You will be boiling in the oil, or someone with a big spear will be stabbing you. Now, it's a psychological similarity. It's, of course, there's no substance to be speared or to be boiled, but it's a kind of torment that is like that, being depicted in the Jatakas. Or if you go to a Janta's temple, he has a series of scenes in which you participate in the mural. That's a very modern way of doing Buddhism that appeals to people of all ages. And also, it's something that is a little out of the ordinary. People will probably remember it. It's the only temple where I saw this kind of thing. Let's see how we are for time. You know, we have about 15 minutes. And now I'd like to ask you something practical. I've been thinking about trying to provide a context where my students and interested others could talk about philosophy in an uncontrived way. In other words, there's no plan, no lesson plan, there's no predetermined outcome, and there's no set of things we have to cover that we don't decide ourselves. How this idea came to me was from experiences that I've already had. For example, in 2 American universities, I would have a discussion afternoon, and I would turn up sitting in the same kind of chair everybody else sat in. So I kind of put myself on the side, the guide on the side, not the sage on the stage, just as a helper. And then I would say, well, what do you want to talk about today? And at first, there would be an uncomfortable silence as nobody wanted to go first. And so we just let the silence work. The silence has a way of moving into words. And sure enough, after a couple of minutes, someone would say, yeah, I think I have something to interest you with. And I would start talking. And somebody else would agree or disagree or point to a book they read about it. And there would be a real learning going on, but it wouldn't be predictable. I called it open philosophy discussion. And I wonder how many of you would be interested in attending for no credit and not as participation points in this class, but just because you want to do it. You want to talk to your colleagues at IBSC about philosophical ideas that come to you. Anybody want to do that? I could probably get a room for Friday afternoon from 2 to 4 if you want to do it. I'm curious who would want to come. Anything you want. Yeah. No boundaries, not a class. Critical thinking. So it would be about sharpening your critical thinking skills by talking to your colleagues about what they are interested in. I think you would like to go, right? You have class all afternoon. Okay. Okay, well, we can think again about the time based on who wants to do this. How's that? Yeah. So, assuming that it's at a time where you don't have a conflict, who would like to do that from this class besides me? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
I want, but I don't have a time because I go back to temple.
Okay. And in the back, anybody want to do this open philosophy discussion? Venerable John or Nandor or Yin Shah? Would any of you want to do this? I can find a way to fit you in if you're interested.
Yes, I'm interested, but I don't know how to do that.
Okay, well, you learn by doing. It's like swimming. You get in the water and you start to swim or you sink, right? Something like that. You observe others, you ask questions. You could try. Nobody's signing up for the whole semester, right? And if it fails, it fails. But I'll share my latest experience doing it before I retired from my longest job, which is the job at Westchester University, where I taught for 24 years in the state of Pennsylvania, about an hour from Pennsylvania, about an hour from UPenn. So I could go in there and get great library books. And what I found was this: the students' interest who followed my Asia courses were not well served by the curriculum. Their interests were not being met by the curriculum. They had many things they wanted to talk about, but they weren't on any syllabus. So the beginning of the semester, we would get together and decide on a book, a recently published book we wanted to work on. So it's a little bit different than the open format I envision here. And then students would take turns presenting chapters. I wouldn't present anything. I would just listen and be a guide. If somebody had a question, they could ask me, but if they didn't, the students teach themselves. So that gives them practice analyzing a document, dividing it into parts, critiquing some parts. And it worked very well. The seminar, we call it philosophy seminar, just kept going on its own energy semester after semester. And finally, I had to leave because I was retiring. So I brought a collection of about 20 different metal thermoses I had collected at different universities all over China. And I put them on a table and I said, I want to give these away because I don't want to carry them. So if you're interested in Beijing or Xiamen, wherever, I'll take one. It's my souvenir to you. Also books. I had a 2,800 square foot house with 3 levels and books in every room. So I didn't want to sell them to the bookman. The bookman would give me 50 cents for 1 pound of book, regardless of what kind of book. I thought, how ridiculous. I want these books to be in the hands of students who would read and use them. So first, one day I invited the graduate students over to have first pick. You can take any book you want, but no more than 5. You have to be able to carry. And then I invited the undergraduates. And finally, all the books were gone. Easy to travel light. Hard to travel if you worship books. So my thought was, I want to be an easy writer. I don't want to carry a lot of things. I don't want to clothes, a lot of books. And gradually, I built a good electronic library. One of my former students gave me a head start. He gave me a really good electronic hard drive. So in the modern world, we don't need to carry books around wherever we go. We have many resources we can use. So that's how that class worked as an open discussion. And then I took one idea from a teaching method that is used to teach children philosophy. And it works very well with children and very well with adults. That is, you pick a topic you want to talk about, you write it down on a slip of paper, and you put it in a fishbowl or something. Like it could be justice, or you're interested in mystery research, or it could be truth, the concept of truth. Any concept that's hard to wrap your hands around. And you want to talk to other people meaningfully about it without reciting a definition. And so we did that one time. It worked pretty well. People picked the concept and we talked as long as that would work, and then tried another. So that's another method. I tend to think for this audience, open discussion would work the best, or maybe the fishbowl approach, just put an idea and push it around and see who picks out what and start talking. Okay, so if this sounds like something you want to do, I will explore with my venerable mentor on this and see if he will identify some possible days when we have a free space for this. And it could start out at my office on the 4th floor of Pundit and move into a better space because my office is too small to put it in. And I want to thank you for today. And this is pretty much the end of today, 3:56. I also want to praise you for taking a course like this, which is probably going to be challenging for many people. And I know it was challenging for me when I was introduced to this method by Stephen Norris, the method of adversarial philosophizing over disputable questions and trying to make your own argument. I think you can do it. Human beings are naturally rational to some extent or other. And when you're reading Introduction to Early Buddhism, you see some questions at the end. That can give you some practice if you think about them. Philosophical questions at the end of sutta. Sutta summaries. Not a lot of examples, just the bare bones of the argument, and then some philosophy questions at the end. So I hope you will continue to work on those sutta summaries. Let's see. We're coming to the end here. This one, I didn't show you the detail of, but I want to point to several features of it in 4 minutes that will enable you to get excited about the reading. Gary Snyder, American Buddhist poet, started by being raised as a farmer and a lumberjack. And he talks about going out on the ocean and seeing the stars at night, and how he found that people were harming the fish and even the birds. And he talks about how there is a tame and also a wild side to the human mind. He asked the question, how can artists and writers join in defense of the planet and the wild side of nature? Well, they can bear witness. Artists are usually not powerful persons or government leaders. They don't have military power, but they have the mirror of truth. Whenever they hold this mirror of truth up to nature, they see what's really happening. The second, they have the heart of compassion. That is the ability to feel and know the pains and delights of other people, and to weave that feeling into their art. So for a writer or artist to be an advocate for nature, you have to first live it. It's no good being an armchair theorist about ecology. You have to know something about it. Even as a boy, I was deeply troubled by the destruction of the forests and the careless way of hunting. And then he has some experiences which he relates to you. And finally, he talks about Buddhist texts from the Rinzai or Lin Chi tradition, and how these fit in to his study of Buddhism in life. That's pretty much it. I hope you get something from it. Okay. So I've covered what I need to cover, and now it's your turn to read all this stuff for week 2. And I'll try to introduce you to interesting bits as we go along to week 3. And one of my strategies will be not to use in class all the research materials I've collected for you, but to give you little selections of them to pique your curiosity. If you want to do research on that, I'll make sure you have the book. And if you don't want Like if you're not interested in Gary Snyder, fine. You may be interested in Justin McDaniel or something else you learned about today. I just share with you chapter 1 of Justin McDaniel. Only if you think he speaks to you, do more. And you can collect a lot of good things from me because I've worked very hard to collect these sources in one of the best libraries in Thailand, the Library of the Siam Society under royal patronage. Okay, so that's it for this week. I hope that you have a wonderful week. I'm not accustomed to say a prayer at the end, but I hope you have a prayer in your heart as you leave. Come. Sadhu.
Next week, are you not able to take class on Monday, right?
I'll be coming from the airport, so I'm asking you to consider switching the class to Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday same time.
Is that okay? Oh, they say okay?
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll ask LG to set it up for us on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Great. Thanks for your cooperation.
You can because you already know
I could make it more instructive. Well, I don't know what's going to be. I only only 3 of them. Can you show me this? Would you want this to be here or move here?
But you need to use all the PowerPoint and the screen and stuff like this.
Let's say there's a good
I'll send you maybe in July. Next week. And on next Monday, you still have a class also?
This is the only person.
And then like next Monday.
There's this Monday, and this week, next week, that Monday, I will be coming to the airport. And only one flight. Actually, that's this. I can't do it. So
So you
should. It's already the class.
Okay.
Okay, we'll figure it out. We will. You guys got an interview.
Let's ask you. Can you send my email address to the group?
Yeah, because we haven't got
Really?
the email.
Oh, no.
Previous week and also like the reading materials.
You haven't got week 1 or week 2?
I've been in the big one.
but you haven't got the
We
material.
haven't got the email.
Okay, how about this?
Another forwarded it to us.
You can sign in here, your email.
Already, I gave
We
it
already
to
gave
you, your phone.
Well, this is where
Okay.
things happen. So if you
Yeah.
write it again very clearly, it will get done. I can list electronically, so I'll just add you to those. And sorry about that. See if I can read it. POD